What the heck is a cotton candy forest? Why don't I like cotton candy forests? Am I on some kind of weird drug? What am I talking about? Well, cotton candy forest is an analogy I thought up of regarding a philosophical issue when we talk about subjects like life after death. And let's get into that now. But before we continue, please hit the subscribe button. That's the only way I can keep this channel going. It needs the momentum, it needs the likes, it needs the shares, it needs the little notification bell being clicked. If you're not logged into Google, then that's how you can subscribe. So make sure you're on your Gmail account when you open up YouTube, and then you'll have access to the subscribe button. And then that'll really help me out, help keep this channel going. Okay, the cotton candy forest. Now, to preface, I do astral projection work. That's what this channel is about. If you're just joining us, we talk about out-of-body experiences, life after death, higher density dimensions, entities in other dimensions, metaphysical concepts, things like that, right? So I do astral projection types of work, which is sometimes difficult and weird. You have to be able to figure out sometimes reality from fiction, if it's something your brain is cooking up, or if your consciousness is truly displaced into another reality. And it's kind of tied in with near-death experiences and many other ways that people tap into the other side and what people on the other side tell us as well. So we have many direct lines of communication, direct lines of experience with what we call the afterlife. And that's my area of work and interest. And there's a lot of accounts now, a lot of corroborated evidence, and a lot of reports about what life is like on this other dimension. Now, there is an issue. You see, I really like nature. If I go out in nature, I feel rejuvenated. And I'm not sure how I feel about going anywhere unless I know that there's mountains, forests, trees, all that good stuff. And, to me, nature is very majestic. So I realized that as I explored the topic of life after death, there was a paradox. The paradox is that there is reportedly no entropy. So we die, we cross over, we enter this other world. Religions call it heaven. We can call it the astral plane. But it's the post-death world, the post-material world, where the laws of physics that we know and recognize are no longer in application, including entropy, so things are not supposed to die. Well, the issue is nature is basically entropy. So when you go out to that beautiful forest, the thing that makes that forest into such a beautiful, pristine place to go camping and hang out at and enjoy and soak up the energy is the fact that it's a system of continual death and rebirth. So leaves fall off the trees, they crumble, they decompose, they turn into parts of the soil. Earthworms help decompose the soil more and help process the soil. This fertilizes it, helps new trees grow, helps new insects come up, helps larger animals come to life. It's this huge, vast system of life continually being generated and appearing and coming out of all over the place. And sometimes it's really beautiful. You have butterflies. Sometimes it's nasty. You have spiders. But it doesn't matter because all of it kind of comes together. And when you look at it as a whole, it's very beautiful. And that's the kind of the main lesson we learn from nature, is that when you look down at on a very minuscule basis, if you're just looking at focusing on like that one creepy crawly insect, maybe it's not such a pretty place. But then when you zoom out and look at the big picture of all these systems in place, then that's when nature becomes a very beautiful thing. So if there is no entropy, there can be no nature, which means there can be no forests and anything that we think of in what we call the afterlife. It would entirely, at that point, then, be a world where everything just stays preserved, and nature would be radically different than what we know it here. And so this brings up the topic of the cotton candy forest. What would nature look like on the other side? Well, you're looking at it. At least you're looking at the wallpaper in the background, because I found this image when I typed in something like artificial forest when I was doing a class on this topic, and then this image came up, and so I stuck with it because it's basically what we're dealing with. The idea that of a completely artificial world that doesn't have natural systems in place, because it's kind of like a fantasy, just a representation of something that is real here, but on the other side, it's kind of fake. So this issue bothered me for a long time until I began having out-of-body experiences and astral projection experiences, and I came to find that my most memorable experiences came about in nature environments. So I had many experiences in like urban cities and crowds of people, but the most memorable ones were like deserts, forests, and places like that. And I noticed that in nature on that higher density, while we feel rejuvenated and full of energy from nature here, it's like 10 times more powerful on that side, which is great because I love nature. But here's the thing. Basically the way I used to conceptualize it as being this big artificial cotton candy world was not like that. It was still nature as we know it, warts and all. But then you have to ask, but if there's no entropy, how can there be nature? Because you can't have one without the other. So without leaves falling and crumbling and decomposing and insects and bacteria and the whole gamut of that we see in the material world, then it's not really a forest. And if all that's just an illusion, then it's not really a forest. Then it's still just a fantasy place, a place that's not real. And I don't want to go to places that are not real. Like if the afterlife is a big illusion land, then send me back to Earth. I will just reincarnate. I have no reason to indulge into a fantasy. That's kind of my fear of that side. It's like, don't give me a fantasy, give me the real thing. I don't want a fake forest. I don't want a fake anything. All this mentally created stuff. I think I'm going to do a video about that next, since we're on the same topic. But yeah, all this mental generated stuff, like I don't want all of that if it's fake. At least in this world, this world sucks, but at least it's not fake. So this topic had been on my mind a lot. Finally, I did have a conversation with my deceased brother about this, and then he really summed it up. Like he really, I met up with him astrally, and he told me what was up. He said that there is nature and there is entropy and the whole thing like we have here. Straight up, insects in the ground, stuff eating each other, the whole thing. Basically, he said that this is called like a nature cycle. So it's kind of like it's its own spirit. It's not like all these little creatures have their own individual souls and they're all suffering and eating each other. Like, you watch those nature documentaries. It looks so horrible, but it's not like it's really creatures suffering. And I guess the same can be said here. If you see like a piranha eat a smaller fish, and you're like, oh no, that poor fishy just got eaten. Well, it's not like there's really suffering going on, because we're dealing with like group souls, and that's kind of how nature operates. When an animal gains enough intelligence, then it begins to command its own physical body in ways that do not happen in this world. So that would be called escaping the nature cycle. So that would mean basically, how do I say it? An animal, an entity, an organism has become self-aware enough that it knows that it doesn't have to be part of the system anymore, and it doesn't have to die. It doesn't have to, be part of an entropic system. It takes command of its own life, and then it begins to move up to the level that we're at. And my brother described as an example like a really smart bird might suddenly gain awareness. But in addition, a pet, it loves its owner, builds that connection with a human, is on a fast track to gaining that kind of sovereign independence of itself. So what have we learned from this? That there is nature, and that there are no cotton candy forests unless that's something that you're into and you want to create or go to a realm like that. To be honest, that'd be kind of fun to visit a candy forest or whatever, a gingerbread town. I don't know, some weird place like that. Okay, it might be fun to visit, but it looks like actual nature systems still exist, and that's the only way I can make sense of it. I saw a image once of the astral side that was taken through a very powerful medium who was instructed to take a photo of a specific spot, and then when he developed the film, it was this very beautiful image of a waterfall, and it was an image of the astral side, and you could see all the nature. I mean, it was a little bit otherworldly looking, but I mean, you could see leaves on the trees, and you could see leaves that have fallen off the trees. Looks like any forest on this dimension. So that's the way I figure it, and I think that's the way it has to be, because the alternative is that we're living in a fantasy world. I'm not so into that. All right, well, this is Cyrus. Thanks for coming by. Again, if you like this stuff, please hit subscribe, and you can click on show more on the YouTube description, and you can find things like my books, Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond, a link to the big Facebook page, which has a lot of discussions going on as we speak. You're missing out if you don't go there, as well as my classes, which I do twice a week. So you can check those out at the links below. I'll see you on the next video.